And people are paying attention to what we're doing in Delaware. So a few months ago, I was invited with Secretary Chu, the Secretary of Energy. He hosted a town hall up in Pennsylvania with Governor Rendell and me, talking about some of these opportunities. I was yesterday gave the keynote speech on wind energy, offshore wind energy up in Philadelphia. I'll talk to you about that more in a second. Gave a similar address a couple months ago in Boston. So people are really paying attention to some of the things that we are doing in Delaware. Some of you may have noticed last June, my first legislative session, I only vetoed one bill. And the bill I vetoed was to repeal the bottle bill. And the bottle bill, the bottle bill, it is flawed. I mean, there is a problem with the bottle bill and its current implementation. But I felt it sent all the wrong signals to veto. I thought it sent all the wrong signals to repeal the bottle bill without replacing it with something better. And so we've been working over the last several months, and Collin has done a really excellent job, basically coming up with a new strategy that would bring universal curbside recycling to Delaware. The problem in the past has been, how do you fund it? We think we've come up with a very interesting funding mechanism, essentially using the 5-cent deposit on the bottle bill for a period of time, turning that into a fee, and then reducing that over a period of time to 2 cents. And what that will do is it will fund the upfront acquisition of much of the infrastructure, the bins and the collection vehicles and the like, that can bring curbside recycling throughout Delaware without any increased cost to consumers above what they're going to be paying anyway for garbage pickup. So that bill is not yet done yet. We're working hard on it. We're hoping that when the legislature comes back in session, we're going to make that happen. Some of you may have seen the announcement about 2 weeks ago. We're working with the Sustainable Energy Utility, which is a very interesting Delaware-specific entity that was created, led by Senator Harris McDowell, who's been focused on these issues for a long time. What they're doing, they're going out, they are doing some bond financing. This is not taxpayer debt. This is not your debt. It's a totally separate entity. And with that money, we are going to be able to make improvements, starting with state buildings. So weatherizing state buildings, replacing boilers, and perhaps putting solar and better windows and all these kinds of things in state buildings, significantly reducing our energy usage, reducing emissions, reducing what's going out of the state's pocketbook. So it's really a triple win, and we think that kind of thing is important as well. And I'm going to ask Collin, if he doesn't mind, to talk about, we actually passed 5 pieces of legislation from last January through June. And I also, where'd Connie go? Connie Merlet is here, whose husband, John Kowalko, really played a key role with us in getting a lot of these 5 pieces of legislation through. But as a result of that, we, in addition to being good public policy for Delaware, a group called the American Council on an Energy Efficient Economy, which does a survey every year of every state in the country. We advanced from 32nd amongst all states to 20th. We jumped more than any other state in their ranking year to year because of the legislation which we got through. And again, Collin really deserves tremendous credit for coming up with it. I think that, and there's a ton more to talk about. I think we're on the cusp of doing some very interesting things. We're putting to use some of the federal stimulus money on weatherization and the like, which is, again, it's good for emissions, it's good for health, it's good for the pocketbook of regular people in Delaware. And I give credit to the Obama-Biden administration for coming up with, as part of the stimulus program. You might like the stimulus, you might dislike the stimulus. The fact is, it is creating jobs here in Delaware. It's also doing important things like helping people reduce their emissions while at the same time helping their pocketbook. So there's a lot of great stuff going on. We're not done by any means. And in my view, this job one for me, job one for our administration, has got to be creating jobs. It has to be. And we are at a position now, we've got a 9% unemployment rate in Delaware. And the problem when you talk about an unemployment rate is you sometimes forget that you're talking about real people. And in our case, it's over 36,000 of our neighbors and our coworkers and our friends and our family who are out of work. And so, you know, all those jobs, not all those jobs are going to be created in the green space. But because of the companies that I talked about before, including PTM, who's here tonight, and others, we think it's an area that's got a lot of opportunity. Let me talk for a moment about wind, offshore wind, and then I'm going to sit down and let Collin come on. So everybody knows that Delaware was the first state in the country to have a signed power purchase agreement for offshore wind between Delmarva Power and a company called Blue Water Wind. Blue Water Wind has essentially been sold twice since then. The first buyer, a company called Babcock and Brown, ran out of money. And then they were recently effectively purchased by NRG. And that industry is incredibly interesting to look at from an outside perspective for this reason. There is not a single offshore wind turbine in this country. Is that a true fair statement? There's not a single offshore wind turbine in this country. Now in Europe there are hundreds. There are not thousands, but there are hundreds. But orders are being placed in Europe for many, many, many more hundreds, into the thousands. So the question is, what is it going to take to be successful here? And that really is the $64,000 question. Tom Norton, sitting in the front row, sort of knows more about this and has written more about this than just about probably anybody in the country. And so we are quite hopeful that the Blue Water Wind project is going to happen. We don't, of course, run an administration based on hope. And so the question is, what can we do to actually make it happen? And so there are a couple of issues, and the ones we have not yet had to confront as a country. Probably the most important issue is, what is it that people are going to pay for their energy? So the Blue Water Wind contract with Delmarva Power was at 9.9 cents per kilowatt hour. And there was an inflation factor that was built in, 3.5% a year. Now, if you talk to most of the companies who are doing this in Europe, they believe the price has got to be in the 20 cent per kilowatt hour range. And so we are some distance from that. So one of the questions is, how do we put this whole thing together in a way that makes it compelling? And so one of the things, so one area is what are people willing to pay? Another has to do with, how do you bring the cost of capital down? Because I mean, these are unbelievably expensive projects. And so how do you bring the cost of capital, meaning the borrowing costs, down to a point where the economics work out? And we're spending an awful lot of time on this. We are working with other governors. The one thing we know for sure is that no state's going to be able to do this alone. These projects have to be very, very big. And we would obviously love to have manufacturing done here as well. But for the Europe, I mean, there's nobody doing it here. They're doing it in Europe. And so to get the Europeans to come here, they've got to have a conviction that it's going to take off in places beyond Delaware. And that's why we're working. It's so important that we work with other states. So Martin O'Malley, who's the governor of Maryland, he has committed. He and I talk about this on a weekly basis. He just committed to, on behalf of Maryland, to purchase, I think, 50 or 55 megawatts off of this system. We're working, many of the governors are working together with the U.S. Department of the Interior to speed up the permitting time. So there's a whole lot that has to be done. We have to make sure the workforce is there. So we're working with Delaware Tech and the like. And that's another whole piece of making sure that the economy gets going. We need more than a good story to tell. We need to make sure that the workforce is there as well. So there are many pieces of this. We're on it. But I think it's going to take more than Delaware to make this happen.